On today's episode of Locked On Wild, another slate of winnable games for the Wild in December. But if you're tied for the most points in the NHL, aren't all the games winnable?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Tog, and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, smash that subscribe button, and join us on your favorite audio platforms as well. Whether you listen to us in the car, at the gym, on your couch, or on your TV, we are happy that you make Locked On Wild part of your routine each and every day. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Zach Zeman returns to discuss the December schedule. We'll take a look at another successful month for the Minnesota Wild. Turns out they hit the over again, and we'll set one for December. We'll also talk about the Locked On Wild Player of the Month for November. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild since 2021, joined by good friend of the show, Zach Zeman, as we are already to December, which I can't believe. But Zach, we're 2 months into the season. October, a success. We set a lofty goal for November. 9.5 wins for the Minnesota Wild. And guess what? They hit it again. 10 wins in the month of November. And it was a lot of the same formula. It just was a Wild team that executed once again.
Yeah, I mean, we should become a sports book at this point. What a line. 9.5. You're Locked On Wild sports book. Oh, I mean, we got a taste of what this team could do in October. You know, we were riding the wave, coming in off the fresh start. In November, we go, yeah, let's throw it at 9.5 because we know what this team's capable of now, right? We're 1 month in. Can this team, we didn't know if it was going to happen, but we said, can this team really get 10 wins in the month of November? And they did. I can't honestly, there was a lot of winnable games in that month, but just to see it in fruition is really incredible. Obviously a couple, divisional losses, but still, you're still getting a 10 win month. And man, I'm happy. I cannot believe it. We have a lot going on within the Minnesota Wild right now. And boy, is it good. We are live.
Yeah, it's the defense led the way. The goaltending was spectacular once again. And I know we haven't seen the wins against Winnipeg or Dallas yet, but the games have been closer, which is a step in the right direction. And guess what? December features 2 more opportunities to snap that skid and to get back into the win column against those 2 teams. You've also got some interesting tests against some other teams in the league that are near the top of their divisions. You got Vegas, you got Florida. We'll go through game by game here in a little bit. But I want to start something here since November was a full slate. You had the full platter of games for the month of November. Which game was your favorite of the month, Zach? I mean, there were some really good wins, some really key wins in that slate. Which one stood out to you the most?
I might have a little bit recency bias, but I'm going to back it up with points here. I think the last couple of games against Chicago and Nashville was really the icing on the cake for this month. You host back-to-back home games, expected wins, but it wasn't pretty, but you still were able to pull out the W's there. I mean, that Spurgeon overtime goal just to seal it and let it go. I mean, man, it was really satisfying. And those 2 last games were something that we're going to remember in that month. There's a lot of ebbs and flows, and, last 2 games are winnable. And just to do that at home, to seal off was really satisfying.
I go back and forth because obviously the month started with a couple of really good wins against Tampa Bay and also that game against Toronto, and Toronto playing a little different style this year than they have in years past. Craig Berube has turned them into more of a defensive team than just hey, we're going to score as many goals as we can and everything else just will fall into place. So those two really stand out to me, but I think you get a second straight win against St. Louis on the road. That's another impressive win this season. The Edmonton game on the road against the Oilers. I think what I'll do, just for the sake of actually picking one, I'm going to take that Toronto game because you've got a lot of really good offensive pieces on that Maple Leafs team, and they only managed one goal against Gus Bus, and you just pretty handily put them in a box and just shipped them on their way. So that would be my pick, but plenty of good games throughout the month, and capped it off with that overtime win against Nashville. That was a fun game too. Fun month for the Wild. Yeah. 16-4-4 on the season. Nice, neat, and tidy record. I love the. I just love how nice that looks, even as just a number. 16-4-4 has a real nice look to it.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the 2 shutouts in that month.
Yeah,
I mean, shutting out the Canadians and in Buffalo. We've had struggles in Buffalo historically in the last 10 years or so. It was a weird game, but you're still shutting out the Buffalo Sabres, winning one, stealing one. Remember we were mentioning how they had to go away and then come back home, and man, we saw how that happened. You still outshot the Winnipeg Jets tremendously, obviously running into the Vezina, Connor Hellebuyck, of course. That's just what happens. I feel every single time the Wild have that game, we always get the worst of it with whatever the opposing team throws at us. But
yeah,
you're still able to weather the storm, and you're not going to hold on to those losses as much. I mean, just back-to-back losses against the Flames and Jets there, and you go ahead and win 3 more in a row just to end out the month. I think it was a sweet one.
Before we move on to the December schedule, let's hand out the Locked On Wild Player of the Month for November. Obviously, as we move forward, we're going to make this a much more interactive bit. Just obviously with all the things that I've had going on over the last couple of weeks, haven't had a chance to put out our usual social posts to get viewer feedback for this award. So for this month, we're gonna pick the 4 usual suspects, and we'll pick one at-large player, and then we'll discuss and decide as to who should win. But I mean, if you're putting together a finalists list, Kirill Kaprizov had 20 points in 14 November games. He had 10 goals in 14 November games. He's got to be on the list. So put him on there. Matt Boldy had 13 points in 15 November games, including 7 goals. You put him on there. Marco Rossi was next with 11 points in 15 November games. He had 4 goals and 7 assists. So I think you got to put him on there too. His faceoff percentage was just under 49. So slap him on that list as well. And then Freddie Gaudreau in double digits for points. He had 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points. He was a +5 for the month. So you can put him in there. And then on the goalie side, Philip Gustafsson, how about this for numbers? 7-3-2, a 1.99 goals against average, and a .932 save percentage. He was unbelievable. Marc-Andre Fleury won all 3 games that he started with a 2.34 goals against average and a .913 save percentage. So he was pretty darn good. So I list all those 5 players who had just unbelievable stats for the month of November, and I'm thinking of going in a completely different direction, Zach, for player of the month for November. Because this particular player capped the month off in pretty grand fashion. And I don't want to do the whole, how does the defense that he's playing compare to how the defense that he's played throughout his career? Because it's too hard to quantify that. But I think the player that I would be willing to nominate for Player of the Month for November, Jared Spurgeon, who played all 15 games. He had 3 goals. He had 6 assists. He had 9 total points, but he was a +7 for the month. And you look at the defense that him and Jonas Brodin have been playing pretty much since the month of November started. Absolute shutdown defense. Like one of the best pairings in the entire NHL from a defensive standpoint. And I know we gave Kirill, him the award to start, or did we give it to Gus? I can't remember. I think we gave it to Kirill.
I think we kind of split it.
That's right, we did. We went co. Thank you.
Yes.
This is why we have you on. We went co-players of the month for October to Gustafson and Kaprizov. And I know Kirill puts up video game numbers, but Jared Spurgeon getting back and getting himself right, I think I'm going to nominate him for player of the month for November.
Yeah, that's extremely valid. I mean, it's so clear how badly this team missed him last year. The impact he's made so far with anybody in that defensive core. He is the captain of this team. It's so clear that this team revolves around him and how he's doing. And just to see his performance, I mean, sealing off the month with that overtime goal. I mean, it's truly so special. And Kaprizov passing it to him nonetheless, which it should be. Kaprizov holds on to that puck, but it's different this year. Everything's clicking offensively, defensively, and in the goalie box. Here's what we got going on. We got a player who currently leads the NHL in points, right? And a goalie who currently leads the league in literally almost every stat other than wins. And it's just like, who would have thought, right? I mean, we're faced with player of the month, but so far these are players of the year in the league. Yeah. And so there's really just not a wrong answer with, what we've seen, especially in the last 3 months or 2 months, but just to keep that going through November is something that I was kind of doubtful of. I mean, to be honest, we've seen this Wild team start slow and, we can see some ebbs and flows, especially in November. But when you're still kicking it in the high note and you're leading the league, tied for first place with a game at hand against Winnipeg, something is right and everything is going perfect for these guys. And that honestly starts with Spurgeon back. I mean, seriously, it all ties back to the injuries last year, and missing Spurgeon was a key piece.
Yeah, most 100%. And I'm going to bring up a point that Alex and I talked about yesterday. So the everydayers will know this the moment I say it, but I think it's so true as to why the Wild were able to beat Nashville. As you look at the end sequence in that game, Philip Forsberg forcing a shot because his season hasn't gone according to plan. And so he's clearly pressing to try to make something happen. And the Wild go down to the other end, and Kirill Kaprizov is playing at a level where we want him to take that shot, but he knows that Jared Spurgeon has the better shot for it. And UC Saros puts all of his attention on Kaprizov. And so then Kaprizov passes it to Spurgeon. Spurgeon scores the game-winning goal. That shows you exactly where these two teams are at. Is Nashville is just trying so hard to make something happen that they're forcing it. And the Wild are like, well, we're just going to get the look that we want, and we're going to come away with the win, and they do. And that's why they're tied for the most points in the NHL. It's not a fluke. It's not.
I mean, that story over in Nashville is insane right now. I was afraid of them walking into the season. They were literally the best team on paper. And, it just happens sometimes where the team doesn't click, make weird decisions, shooting pucks where they don't need to be shot and giving up weird 2-on-1s. And, then it just goes and the game ends and you just lost the Minnesota Wild who, weren't supposed to be where they are right now. And this team was not talked about all year long, all off season long about there's a contending, chance with the Minnesota Wild. It was all on Nashville making the plays with Stamkos and whatnot. And, it just goes to see that this Wild team's playing on, do I say house money? Do I? I don't know. Is it too early? But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, man, this team's clicking everywhere and it's a joy to watch. It's really cool to see a team effort, right? We've seen player of the month last year was literally the easiest answer, right? There's one guy who dominated every year. The polls on the Twitter were 100% basically. And now this year you see you just made a case for 5 guys, right?
Yeah.
5 guys in the month of November who are great arguments. And who would have thought that that's a legit scenario, right? It's truly mind-boggling, and it's so fun, man.
Yeah, and you could put John Hines in there too for the job that he continues to do coaching this team. It's a collective, it's a unit as opposed to like 2 guys that are continuing to get the job done. So I think we'll go with Spurge. We'll go with Spurgey. If anybody has any other nominees that we missed, make sure to leave them in the comment section. But I think the Player of the Month committee has officially. We're going to officially motion for Jared Spurgeon to win Player of the Month for November. Let's get to the December schedule because, as I mentioned, some key Central Division opponents coming up. But also, we get a chance to see some West Coast teams, and I'm going to absolutely unload on the NHL for a schedule decision that has me irked. We're going to talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And Prize Picks is the best place to get real money. You can join 10 million users and sign up today. My favorite part about Prize Picks is you can pick athletes from multiple sports. If you're feeling like supporting Justin Jefferson and taking the over on his receiving yards, if you think he'll get over 87.5 receiving yards, you pick him. If you think Kirill Kaprizov will get over 1.5 points against the Vancouver Canucks, you can pick him too. And if you think that the Minnesota Timberwolves will miss all of the 3-pointers that they take, you can certainly take that as well. All kidding aside, hope the Timberwolves get back on track because that's been a little bit of it's been a little dicey to start the season, to say the least. But hey, that's why the Wild are here. And Prize Picks allows you the opportunity to support all of your favorite sports teams each and every night. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL, and you can get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out our preview of tonight's game against the Vancouver Canucks. Trevor Beggs of Locked on Canucks joined us as we talked Quinn Hughes, Kirill Kaprizov, Elias Pettersson, Joel Eriksson, Matt Boldy, Brock Besser, you name it. We hit every player on both rosters, including Kevin Lankinen, who's 10-0 on the road to start the season as a goalie. I don't get that at all. But we talked about it. So make sure to tune in and check that episode out if you missed it today. Full intel for you for tonight's opponent. And, of course, we'll have a Locked on Wild postcast for you after the game as well. We got you covered, win or lose. I hope it's another 10-7 game, but something tells me it's not going to be. But we'll see. But, Zach, that starts off a busy December schedule. 14 games in total for the Minnesota Wild in December, including one that I'm going to absolutely rail on the NHL for because I'm sitting here scanning through. And on Wednesday, December 18th, the Minnesota Wild play the Florida Panthers at home. It's a TNT game. And so you know what that means? 8:30 scheduled puck drop. So closer to 9. We have to, as a society, we have to stop with scheduling games at 7 o'clock Eastern on the East Coast when you are going to have a Central Division game after that. Bump it up to a 6 o'clock Eastern game. It's not going to lead to mass chaos or a mass exodus. It's not going to lead to any sort of violent outbursts. Start it at 6 p.m. Eastern and start the GD Central Division game at 7:30. I'm begging you. Or start it at 7.
Yeah, I mean, just think about the Florida Panthers fans who are going to stay up until 9:30 local time in Florida to watch this game. It doesn't really make sense. I'm sure there's TNT national television scheduling. Like, it all makes sense, but it doesn't to us. It doesn't. It will never. I feel like whenever we play Florida, it's always some weird game. I literally every time. A Wednesday night, I mean, everyone making the trek to St. Paul from, even Minneapolis, that's still like an hour and a half later than you would. I don't know. It all just doesn't really make sense. Put that out Friday or Saturday, or you know what I mean? Wednesday doesn't really fit.
And this is the thing too, like the Black Friday game at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the NHL had a full slate of games because everybody was off for Thanksgiving. So you have a full slate of games on Black Friday, and you have like 6 of the games starting before 3 o'clock Central Time. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, you need to. Here's what you do. Here's how you fix this. You do what the NHL does, or what the NFL does, excuse me. You have games that start at noon Central, 3 Central, 6 Central, and then the West Coast games. Do that. Do that on weekends. Do that every weekend.
It's a big sigh.
Schedule rant over, but it's serious. That just, like, for somebody who is now, and maybe this is me, old man yells at clouds. So if anybody thinks that I'm kind of doing that, feel free to turn me into a meme on social media. But why do we have to have an 8:30 Central start?
Yeah, it's tough. Can I turn it into a lighter note?
Yes.
A lighter note, the Wild are finally being rewarded for all of the away games they played earlier.
Yes.
So that's probably the biggest takeaways. There's only 5 away games. There's 9 home games. There's a 5-game home stretch from December 12th to the 20th, which is pretty solid. A lot of good opponents, I would say, in those span. I mean, you welcome the Oilers, the Flyers, the Golden Knights, the Panthers game that we were just talking about, and Utah. Utah's first time at the X after the name change. That'll be a fun game. And the good thing about that is, like, there's 5 home games, but they're all evenly spaced out. I think that's something that is really cool to see. Very, very good for the Wild. Just being able to actually relax for all the stuff they went through in the first month of October there. But yeah, I mean, another West Coast back-to-back. You see, instead of it being San Jose and Anaheim in November, you get Anaheim and now Los Angeles Kings. So those will be interesting. At least the Kings game starts at 7 p.m. on Saturday. That's going to be okay. We're going to make up for the better start times and then pay for them later, whereas the 9 home games is kind of the reward for the month. It's going to be really interesting, but I do like that 5-game home stretch.
Yes, that'll be a nice opportunity to get used to some home cooking for once, because the Wild have been very road heavy to start the season. Not that they're complaining, because they're tied with the most road wins this season so far with Vancouver, who is coming to the X to start off the month. You host Vancouver, then you go at Anaheim, at Los Angeles, at Utah, home against Edmonton, Philly, Vegas, Florida, Utah, at Winnipeg on the 21st. That'll be appointment viewing, and that's also a 6 p.m. Central start. Thank you for using logic. Monday the 23rd, home against Chicago, then at Dallas on December 27th, home against the Senators on the 29th, and New Year's Eve, a Tuesday. Oh, I forgot about the fact that. Okay, another thing that I think I have turned into old man yells at cloud. New Year's Eve is on a Tuesday this year. That is me no likey.
It's Nashville too.
Me no likey. New Year's Eve on a Tuesday, and then Christmas Day is also on a Wednesday this year.
I love how the Wild are currently the best team in the league, and we're coming on here complaining about the scheduling. But I will say, what annoys me the most, and I'm gonna match your energy level here and your disappointment level, is that the Wild host Utah, right, on the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, in less than 24 hours after dropping the puck against Utah, you go to Winnipeg. I get they're close to each other, St. Paul and Winnipeg, but let's look at Winnipeg's schedule here. Before the Wild make the trip up to Winnipeg to go play the Jets, before coming back and playing the Blackhawks 2 days later, the Winnipeg Jets' last game is Wednesday, and the Wild play them Saturday, right? But then the Wild also play Utah Friday and then go to Winnipeg. So the Wild played 2 games after Winnipeg's last before playing the Wild. It's just, you can't make that up, especially against a division rival who are the 2 best teams currently as we're recording this. Who knows if it'll fluctuate right now. It's just like, you can't make it up. I feel like it reminds me of every time the Wild go to Florida and Tampa. It's always a back-to-back, and it's always very hard road trip. So,
hot take: the Wild are going to win that game against Winnipeg on the 21st.
Oh my gosh, that's when you know this team's built like that, is when they win both those, and you're just like, okay, mic drop. Like, they're just going to silence us.
I'm all for it. Let's do this. Let's break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the key games of the month. We'll set the over-under, and we'll throw out some bold predictions for who we think is going to light the lamp the most. Who's going to keep it lit? Anybody going to score in all 14 games this month?
Probably.
We'll find out after the break. We finished today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. If you have not already, take the opportunity to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, smash the like button, comment, whatever you want to do. All of the interaction helps Locked On Wild. It boosts us. So comment, like, subscribe, you name it. We appreciate the support each and every step of the way. Zach, let's talk about some of the key games for this month. Obviously, at Winnipeg and at Dallas on the 21st and the 27th. But the game that I think I'm really most intrigued by this month outside of those two is the game against Vegas on December 15th. A chance to see the Golden Knights, who are currently pacing the Pacific Division. It's a team that has, since their inception, been right in the mix They just continue to make deals and trade their way into relevance. It's going to bite them at some point, but that's going to be a fun test after the Wild have an opportunity to potentially get even for that clunker they had against Philadelphia on the road in Philly. That'll be an interesting stretch. Those two games, I think, are the ones that I'm keyed in on probably the most outside of the obvious Central Division games.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the classic Zach Zeman picks the Central Division games as the most important because it's my bit. Also, I think the Utah games, respectfully, are like actually pretty good because you see this Utah team for the first time all year. And it's one home and one away, the away one coming first. And they're a team that, I don't know, is still kind of, I like them, honestly. I think they're really fun to watch, but you just don't know sometimes with those weird Central Division teams. The Wild kind of struggled with Chicago and Nashville last month. And so you kind of hope for the Wild to, find their bearings and roll their way through Utah. Those two I'm circling just like their logo is circled.
Good call. And the other thing too is this reminds me of when Seattle first came to the league and the Wild played their first game in Climate Pledge Arena. And if I recall correctly, the first game in Climate Pledge Arena was a loss for the Minnesota Wild. Now, they did end up having good success against Seattle the rest of that season, but it's a new environment, and especially if it's as intense as the Utah atmosphere has been billed to be, that can cause some problems.
Yeah.
So that is definitely one that the Wild are going to need to be on their guard for. Another 8:30 start, but at least that one is in a different time zone. Yeah, I'm getting too old and bitter.
I think we're getting too technical, but yeah, I mean, seeing this Utah team for the first time all year, a divisional game, it's going to mean a lot, and you got to go in there and act like they're new to where they belong and show them who's boss, right?
Yeah. As far as an over-under goes, this is interesting because I want to kind of keep the good vibes that we've had so far. You've got 14 games in the month of December, but in terms of playoff caliber teams, Vancouver, Los Angeles, Edmonton, Vegas, Florida, Winnipeg, Dallas are all teams that are in the postseason right now. So you look at, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. If you can go 4-3 in those 7 games, that is going to determine how the rest of this month goes. If you can at least go above 500 in those games, and even in those 7 games, if it's 14 points, if you can get 8 points in those 7 games, that is, I think, a big step in the right direction. I'd love to see 2 against Dallas and Winnipeg, but even 1 win against those 2, just to tip the scales in the Wild's favor with those 2 teams. It's been over a calendar year since the Wild beat either of those 2. And if you can just get back in the win column, that is going to further what has been a really good start to the season, but you can't take any of the other teams lightly. Ottawa Senators lost in overtime to the Anaheim Ducks. Don't take them lightly. Don't take Philadelphia lightly ahead of the Vegas game. Don't take Chicago lightly ahead of the Dallas game. Don't take the Ottawa Senators lightly ahead of the Nashville game. And it's a Wild team that really, even if they get off to a slow start, even if they find themselves behind by a goal or 2, they have shown the ability to work their way back and to at least keep them competitive. The defense, unless it just completely falls apart, the defense is going to keep them in just about every game this year. So if you can go in 14 games, I'm going to set the over for the month of December. I'm going to set the over at 8.5, because if you go over that, that means you went 9-5 in a pretty tricky month of December. I think we would take 9-5, considering that 7 of the games this month are against legitimate playoff teams.
Yeah. But the floor is probably 6, right? Like at minimum, you're winning 6, but at most, you're winning more than 8.5. I like 8.5. It's really interesting because we set these bars and they still beat them. They've beaten them both times. They're 2-0 against us. But this month has probably the hardest scheduling, I believe. Like you said, you see a lot of these playoff contending teams. You can't take Central teams lightly, but also you have a homestand in the middle of it. So you got to win early in the month in order to hit this 8.5. I don't think it's going to come late. I don't think it's going to come down to last game like it did in November, but I do like 8.5. I believe they're going to hit the over. I do see a lot more winnable games, especially on the road, than I did last month. And I think they do win and have success in this homestand. And I think that's what's going to put it just a little bit over 8.5. It's going to be close. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. This is going to be a real test of the metal. When you play Mortal Kombat and they say test your might, this is Mortal Kombat month for the Minnesota Wild. But I think they're certainly capable of it.
We said November is the biggest month of this season, but December is can you keep the ship afloat in the midst of all the havoc that's going on? And your expectations are so much higher now. And in the beginning of November, they just weren't. The Wild were on the high note coming off that road trip success. And so we were like, wait, can they actually continue to win? And now it's like, okay, now you're expected to win. See it.
Yeah. You navigated through choppy waters. Now you got a squall coming in. Can you keep the boat upright? Can John Hines navigate through choppy waters and keep the boat upright? Me personally, my bold take for the month, I don't do this often. My bold take for the month, 11 wins.
Oh my goodness. I thought you were going to say under 8.5.
No.
Okay,
I'm fully in.
I was shaking my head when you were just saying all that. I was like, he's going to take the under. Okay, 11 is a lot, and I do like where your head's at because we've seen it now. We've just explained in the past 40 minutes how good this team is, and it's so true. And man, it's more than just one player of the month. It's 5 great cases, and that's the motto.
Yep,
everyone's clicking.
It's all clicking. Kirill, Matt Boldy. I think somebody else is going to step up and turn this into their month. I don't know if it's going to be Marcus Johansson or Joel Eriksson-Ek, but I get the sense that somebody's going to hop into the forefront and really turn this month into theirs. Maybe it's Marco Rossi. In fact, let's just bold prediction say that Marco Rossi is going to go on a tear this month. And
first line center, that's the most dependent position on any team. You have to be good.
Light it up, fire it up, and we'll see how the month of December goes. But Zach, thanks for joining as always here today. And listeners, thank you as always for tuning in to each one of our episodes here on Locked On Wild. We appreciate all the support. Now that Locked On Wild has officially hit the 3,000 subscribers mark on YouTube, let's just keep it rolling right through to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and further and further. Let's just keep this party rolling, just like this Minnesota Wild team has. We're going to match their energy. We're just going to keep having fun here throughout the rest of the year into 2025. So make sure to stick with us all season long so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday, and a lot of the times we bring you bonus episodes too. You can find all of our new content as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.